Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday. I hope you've all had a restful morning and that you're all staying safe and doing your best to stay safe and healthy during this unprecedented time that's going on in the world. I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Kate LeConte, and I'm with Patients Like Me. And if you don't know what Patients Like Me is, we are a health information sharing platform for people with chronic health conditions. In today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the many aspects of clinical trial research, as well as taking time to answer some of your questions from the patient community surrounding clinical trials. Joining us today, we are so excited to have Christine Von Raesfeld. She is one of our 2018 Team of Advisors members, an incredible patient advocate, and the founder of People with Empathy. We're so happy to have partnered with Christine today to host this Zoom event, even though we'd rather be face-to-face, and we do have to do this on Zoom today. Welcome, Christine.
Hi. So let me introduce myself really quick. Kate gave a basic information, but a little bit of it, but I am a patient advocate. I deal with rare disease, lupus, multiple conditions. I've had toxic encephalopathy, toxic damage from medications, but still willing to participate in clinical trials when I can, and just kind of want to help our community and make sure that things out there are benefiting all of us, and that things are being done with us in mind. So I want to thank you guys for bringing me on and letting me share my perspective. And thanks for mentioning my nonprofit. So really quick, if you're interested in that part, we're interested in breaking down silos in healthcare and connecting key stakeholders. So I'll give it back to you. And we're interactive, so comment, tell us where you're coming from. We've got people in the chat room monitoring that, and we want to know what you're thinking. And if you have questions, feel free to hit them up in there while we're live. We'll do our best to answer any of them that we can. If we can't get to them, I'm sure Patients Like Me will take care of that and get back to you soon. So
yeah. Absolutely, Christine. We're so excited to have you on board today. And for those of you who don't know, Christine has been such an amazing partner and friend to Patients Like Me over the past few years. And over the next 45 minutes, she's going to be sharing her perspectives and experience with clinical trial research, as well as taking time to answer some of your questions from the Patients Like Me community that you've been submitting over the past couple of weeks. I do want to, go back to what Christine said and just give everybody a huge thank you to everyone who submitted a question so far. We've had some really great questions in that we think are going to help facilitate a wonderful discussion today. So we're really excited to jump in and share those. If you have a question that you think of during this webinar, or you weren't able to submit one prior to the webinar today, don't worry, you absolutely did not miss out. You can comment below and ask your question, and we will try to answer a handful of those questions live during the webinar today. And just remember, when you're doing that, all we ask is that you please try to just keep your questions short. That will, help us be able to review and answer your question in a more productive way. And to everybody that did ask a question, and if we didn't have time to answer it live on today's webinar, we will be doing a follow-up post on Patients Like Me, answering your questions, as well as we will be hosting 2 more live events talking about clinical trials with 2 of our other Team of Advisor members. So we'll absolutely take some time to address your question at a later time. So like Christine,
I was going to say, and just to play off of that, I also have a webinar next week coming up. So some of the topics that we discuss here, I'll actually be speaking with the VP of Worldwide Clinical Trials at Aurinia, and one of my own board members that works with PTC Therapeutics, and giving you a view of how the actual drug process works. So if we don't get to that here, we'll get more into detail in that. So tune into there, and then Patients Like Me can answer the other questions you have.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing that, Christine. And like Christine said, we are interactive today. So we'd love to have you start commenting below and letting us know where you're listening from today. We want to know what parts of the country people are from. And yeah, we're really excited to jump in.
And I want to know which one of my friends actually tuned in. So They need to write their names. Go ahead, Kate. We'll
Yeah,
start
sure. So I guess we can just start off jumping into our first question. So this question we saw a lot within the community when we were asking people to submit questions. And that, Christine, is, do clinical trials actually help? How do you know when you've found a trial that's legit? And another question is if you have to pay to be a part of a clinical trial, is that a warning sign? Do you mind talking to that point a little bit?
Sure. So I'll start off on the whole thing. Clinical trials, I think right now is the time that we need to reframe thinking on clinical trials. So I know that a lot of patients are very scared about clinical trials, that, there's a lot of questions. I hear them, I see them, I have them. And I want people to know that there is a process to the way things work, despite what's going on. And we want to kind of reinform you and then kind of reframe the way that people think about clinical trials. So clinical trials, they do help. We have drugs now that work and that are being used to treat you as a patient that went through a clinical trial. So obviously they work, and they are important. And what people don't understand is that these are very monitored. As a patient, you don't go into this and lose meds and all of this. So first off, I want to say they do work. You should participate, but clinical trials are not an end result or an end thing that you go to when you have nothing else to go to. Clinical trials should be done when you are first diagnosed with a disease, and we'll get into it later, but there's comorbidities and things that can exclude you from a clinical trial. And once you get to that stage, it's harder to get you in. So we want you to get involved now while you are, while you're fairly healthy, and when you can make a difference and an impact. So anyone that has participated in clinical trial from before can tell you they help. And I don't know, finding clinical trials, we would refer you over to clinicaltrials.gov. I'm not sure what Patients Like Me has up at this point to connect patients. Kate, do you mind filling in on that?
Sure. So on Patients Like Me right now, really, we are all about members sharing their world experiences. And oftentimes, some members will come in and talk about and track a clinical trial that they're currently in, or they'll talk about, how they're reacting when they're in this clinical trial. And other members may weigh in and ask them about their experiences, what the outcome is in that clinical trial. And, they really can foster a great discussion just by one person sharing their experience about a clinical trial that they're in. So that's what we're all about at Patients Like Me, sharing real world experience, having patients share real world experiences to other patients that are like them, and really just starting a really great discussion on that. And people can track the progress of their health when they're in that clinical trial as well.
And I forgot what the second part of my question was.
Yeah, no, I'll let you know, Christine. So the next question was, so how do you know when a clinical trial is legit? Like, what signs should you look for? Other people were worried about, is it a warning sign if somebody's asking you to pay to be a part of a clinical trial?
So generally, you should not be paying to be a part of any clinical trial at all. You're a patient, your data is needed to do this research, so you shouldn't be paying to do this. I, again, would refer you to clinicaltrials.gov. It is the one site that has clinical trials listed. It is a little difficult to maneuver. So I'm sure patients like me will eventually come up with something to help you do that. And there are sites that do that. But I want to make sure that people know you have to do your research. And it's not something that you go into lightly. It's something that you have to think about and talk to your family and friends about, and really get to know the process before you decide to do anything. So clinicaltrials.gov is the site that you would go to find out about them. A lot of people say their doctors know, but I think from most of you know from your personal experience, doctors don't push clinical trials. And I don't want to spend my time with my doctor discussing clinical trials. I want him to talk to me about what's going on in my disease state and where I am. And that should be done somewhere else with the clinical trials. So right now, it is a lot of kind of self-advocacy that you need to do. And I would, for any patient, just suggest look into them. There's clinical trials don't just include drugs. And I want people to know that I participated in clinical trials that had to do with Apple watches and different things. So they're not all scary. We have to change the way we look at this. But yeah, there's different places. I would just do your research, make sure you're diligent, make sure that you're finding out, and do not pay to be a part of a clinical trial.
Mm. Christine, I really like that you shared that with our members, that clinical trials, they don't have to be this big, scary experience, right? You said you've participated on Apple Watch. Some can be virtual studies. And it seems like there's a lot of information out there for people to be able to learn about clinical trials. So that, kind of sways nicely into my next question is, if somebody wants to get more involved in clinical trials, how do they go about doing that?
So let's see. I would say first is doing your own research, right? Talking to people in your community, seeing what they're talking about, seeing if other people are involved in clinical trials, because there may be a trial that you've never heard of. And I know a lot of us don't have the time to do this research on looking at what you can do because we have our own lives. And a lot of people don't live in their disease space. So I would say refer to your community. I would look for organizations after you've done your research that you trust, that are looking out for the best interest in patients. And then again, if you're willing to do that research on your own, do that. I would connect with teaching hospitals. It kind of depends on how far you want to get into this. But I want people to keep in mind that any clinical trial you do, it doesn't just benefit yourself. You do clinical trials not to help you. This is to help your niece, your mother, your grandmother, anyone, right? So I think just looking at it that way is a different way, and just getting involved in your community, finding out what people are doing, and just talking. I think it's conversation and it's discussions that are going to provide solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on a really important point there that, when you're participating in clinical trial, it is for yourself, but it's also to help your community, your friends, your family, other people who are going to be diagnosed with the condition that you have today. So by participating, you're also helping your greater community as well. So I think that's such an important fact that you touched on today. Christine, my next question that we had from the community are, what are the types of general requirements for clinical trials?
So that basically depends on each individual trial.
Mhm.
Some of them, there's certain diseases, there's inclusions, exclusions, which means, if you have this condition, but you have another condition that might disqualify you. So those things I would refer specifically to each individual trial to see what requirements are. And again, I'm sure you'll go into this in detail later discussing other trials, but it would be, again, do your research, like reach out, talk to people. Did I answer that? I completely spaced.
No, absolutely. I think you touched on the fact that, it really just depends on that individual clinical trial. It seems like there are clinical trials for all different types of people out there. Would you say that there are clinical trials for people who are both newly diagnosed and people who have had their conditions for, longer periods of time?
There are clinical trials for everyone. There are actually even clinical trials for healthy people. So because you do need to measure markers on people with these drugs and with these things that we test, medical devices, any of these things. So you need sample populations, and you'll go into that. We'll go into that later in our discussion on how they determine who is involved in clinical trials. But again, it's each individual trial. Some of them are newly diagnosed people. They don't want any other diseases. Other clinical trials, you may have this. You may, kind of depends.
Great. Yeah, no, that's such helpful information, I think, to share back with the community. One of the questions that we had from a community member that I think your experience can speak great to is somebody asked, if you're in a clinical trial and it somehow causes damage or you find your health decreasing, like what are the measures that are in place to make sure that you're still receiving like the proper care and treatment?
So I've heard people talk about placebos a lot, and that's a very interesting thing because I think with this negative outlook that we have on clinical trials, placebo is looked at, people are like, I don't want to take nothing. So what I want to say first is when you are in a clinical trial, they are concerned with your care. You probably will get better care being on a clinical trial than you would just monitoring yourself on your own. So placebo, they don't pull you off your treatments when you are experimenting with other things. So I want people to know that a placebo does not mean that you're just suffering out there on your own. You're still on whatever meds, they're monitoring you. If you do have issues, there's teams to, come in and they moderate you, and you can talk about your issues with them, and you can pull out of a clinical trial at any time. So these things you need to talk to with the individual trial coordinator. And I would just make sure that if you are looking to participate in these things, have these questions beforehand. Write them out so that you know, because when you're in that moment and you're talking to someone, you forget everything that you wanted to talk about, especially when you're getting heavy information. So write things down, have your questions ready, and then just talk. I think a lot of these issues too arise with no communication, and patients kind of feel like they explained it to me, but they didn't answer my questions. But then you also have to think on your end, did you ask those questions? Because people can't read your mind. And if you have issues and concerns, those need to be brought up. And if you participate in a clinical trial, you do have responsibility in this. It's not like you're just in this trial. Everybody has a little part of it, and we all contribute to it. So, again, I said get everybody involved, get your family involved, get your support people, whoever you have around you, and look at this from different perspectives.
Absolutely. And I like the point that you made that if something were to go wrong, or if you found, your health wasn't benefiting for the clinical trial, I think it's really helpful to know that you have that team of doctors and that care team that's by your side. And like you said, you're going to get such great care when you're a part of one of these clinical trials. And I think that's something that will really resonate with the community, knowing that they'll be so supportive when they're going through this.
Yeah, it's not like they put you on a drug that they mixed up in the back corner yesterday. These are going through extensive trials before it even gets to a human. So I think that's what people need to remember. And yes, there are chances that bad things happen, but bad things happen in life all the time. Are you not going to get in a car ever because there's a chance that you might get into an accident? So I think just, and think about, instead of thinking about these negatives, think about the positives that come out of these clinical trials. Even if there is an adverse reaction, now that's noted. And now they won't try that with someone else. So, and they're going to take care of your adverse reaction. They're going to make sure that you are okay through this whole thing. And so I think that's what people need to remember is you're not being given a drug and left out there to fend for yourself. You have a team of people working with you and supporting you who want to know the information and get the results that you have. So
Yeah, no, I think that that's so important. And thank you for sharing that and being so open. And I think that's such an important point that we can share with our members. So my next topic, Christine, we talked a little bit about, the general requirements and how they're helpful and how people can find clinical trials. So let's talk a little bit about what happens in a trial once you're in it. And I know some people in our community had some questions in regards to the consent process. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So the consent process, oh gosh, we have, I was like, I had something prepped and now I can't find my paper. Uh, but basically, I don't want to go into the whole details of all the consent process because it is a long and detailed thing. But I do want to say in regards to that, I know that you guys will have follow-ups on consent and we'll talk about it as well. But with the consent, you basically are saying that you consent to participate in this trial, but you do say, here's all of these things and I'm consenting with these obligations or with these requirements. Again, go through them all. You do have that opportunity to get out of it. They're asking for your consent, which actually is a positive, right? They're asking you for your permission on what you need to do. So in regards to consent, I would say read through these things, talk to people again. And then it's individual trials. You need to talk to your clinical trial coordinator, I'm spacing on words this morning, talk to those coordinators and work with them, because consent is that they want to make sure that you are okay.
Yeah.
So I think that we'll all go into consent as we go forward, but since we're kind of basically just giving this overview, I think just knowing, I think that consent is needed should be a positive for all of you patients. That they're asking you, they're not just taking your data, they're not just doing this without permission. You're signing an agreement, you have a part in this, and your voice matters. So any concerns you have, anything, those are addressed in that consent.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. I know we're going to talk about the patient voice a little later on too. So I know you'll have some great insights to share. Do you also mind talking about some of the questions that we got from the community were just around the different stages of clinical trials? Can you share a little bit more about your experience with that?
So there are different phases, and from the process from the very beginning is the whole research and discovery, and there's different phases of the trials where I'm trying to keep it very basic, sorry, and different phases of the trial where first they test on animals or cells, or depending on that specific trial. Oh gosh, I completely spaced on the question.
No, that's perfectly okay. Just share a little bit about your experience with the different stages of the
Oh,
clinical.
the different stages. So it is. So I actually went through a service for a lot of my clinical trials. I went to a direct to consumer type thing, right? It was an organization that I signed up for, got my information, and they helped me with clinical trials. So I actually went out on stage at Startup Health last year. I don't even remember what year we're in, and spoke about the clinical trials process and kind of involving patients on a different level. And so I did work with a company that does that, and they reach out to patients and they do marketing between patients, and it's kind of a referral system. But it also has a different kind of spin to it, where they have a clinical trials coordinator that will call me, that will walk through the process, that explains it. She's a person that gets it, right? It's someone that you can talk to, that you can answer and ask questions, and it doesn't feel like this stuffy environment, and you can ask whatever questions you have and not feel like you're less than, because this is another person. And then this company, it doesn't always work, but we're going in that way of virtual clinical trials. But they would do whatever they could, send a nurse out to your home. And I know patients like me used to do with the Digital Me program that they had. It was more of a virtual type thing where it's sending people out to your homes, and a whole nother aspect of the
Yeah.
clinical trial.
So
But I
no, just a quick question there. You talked about this clinical trials coordinator. Is that someone that is like that will be typically assigned to you in a regular clinical trial?
Yes, there's usually somebody that's in charge of your case. Sorry, dog just walked by. Um, there's usually someone, and you will have someone throughout the process that is your contact. So you'll have someone that you can reach out to, that you can, any of your issues, that walks you through this process. So you're not doing this alone. And I think that that's a big thing that people are confused about, right? And you do have someone this entire process to walk you through. So originally, you're releasing your medical records, you're coordinating, you're signing paperwork, and hopefully you have a trial coordinator who is on top of things and can relate to you. But again, we're working in this space that's kind of new, and I think conversation is what we need to kind of figure these things out, because we're moving into this new world and things are changing. So I think even you as a patient out there, like, suggestions that you have, what you think, you should share that with your clinical trials. If you do get involved in a clinical trial, tell them what's difficult for you, what makes things easier, kind of help them, because we're in this together. And I think that's what people don't realize, is that as patients, we can't expect other people to come up with answers for us. They don't know the problems and the issues that we deal with, and they won't know until you tell them. So getting involved and walking through these processes, and it's a whole step process of, how do you do this, how do you get involved, and all of the paperwork. But again, I think it's having someone, and that would be your clinical trial coordinator, um, walk you through. But
That's
go ahead.
great. It's nice to know that you'll have somebody assigned to you as you're going through the clinical trial, someone you can ask questions to, kind of raise your concerns to. I think that's really helpful to know that someone like that might be available to you when you're in a clinical trial.
Yeah.
The last topic that we had is one that, Christine, you have an abundance of knowledge in. You are such a patient advocate in your community, and you know how to feel empowered and make your voice heard. And some of the questions that we had from the community are about how you can make sure that you're being heard and listened to in your clinical trial.
So again, this is my whole your voice matters. So I don't know if a lot of people know my backstory, but there was a period of time, and still I fight for diagnosis every day. Right? I deal with rare conditions and lupus, and there was a period of time where I was stuck in my bed for a year, and I was going through brain issues, and I pretty much was at a point where I had given up. And I think it was this whole empowerment thing that got to me, right? I'm on the board for More Than Lupus, and Kelly was this woman that inspired me to kind of get out of bed. And I think knowing as a patient that you have control,
Mhm.
that this is your life, that no one else is looking out for you but yourself. And you have to know that you have a voice and that your voice is important. Because for a while, I kind of gave in. Doctors told me things, I just went along with what was said, and I got worse because of it.
Mhm.
So I think being open, being honest, having that line of communication is what's going to help you. And whether you're participating in clinical trials or decide to or not, just knowing that you have those options and talking to people about it, and knowing that clinical trials don't just benefit you,
Mhm.
right? And there are opportunities. We're in this COVID state where nobody knows what we're dealing with. And these trials need healthy people, because some of these trials are just logging symptoms. Do you have a sore throat today? No. Great. And that's it. So I think you have a chance from home, wherever you are right now. Everyone is living virtually. We're kind of on an even playing field right now. And as a patient, you're in the same space as a CEO of a company. And all that matters is you getting your voice out and being heard. So you talking to people, but laying in bed and just kind of dealing with what other people are telling you and accepting that isn't where you should be. So you need to know yourself, I guess.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that, Christine. And one of the questions that we had from the community, on that topic is, in regards to clinical trials, is, are you able to talk to your doctors frequently during a clinical trial? And if so, do you believe that helped? Did you feel heard, when you did that, when you were participating in trials?
So for me, myself, I've done a few, and the doctors that I've had, it kind of depends on which doctor is involved. But yes, with every trial I've done, I've talked to doctors. They may not have been my primary physician at that point, but I do have some medical personnel guiding me through the same thing. But I took that as, I need to speak to my doctors, and so that's what I think you need to know too as a patient.
Mhm.
They have jobs and they have other things to do. And your job as a patient is to take care of you. No one else's job is to take care of you. So if there is that gap in your coverage, or if there's a gap in where your records are lying, that is your responsibility to get those and communicate with the rest of your team, because it's you and you have to take charge. That was my patient thing when I did my patients like me a few years ago, was take charge. So I think, just knowing that you have a voice, knowing that you matter. All of this research doesn't happen without you. So you are the main subject in this, and your voice matters. So when you have an issue and someone doesn't listen, go to someone else.
Mhm.
You can fire doctors. People don't realize that. Doctors don't know everything. And if your doctor thinks he does, maybe you need another doctor. Because I'm a person and I have flaws, and I make mistakes. And if you have someone in your life and on your team that thinks they don't make mistakes and think there isn't a chance for mistakes, then you might be associated with the wrong team.
So it sounds like, when you were able to talk to your doctors frequently and advocate for yourself when you were participating in these trials, that was really beneficial for you.
It was. And a lot of my communication too, because my doctors have limited time. I go to email, I make sure that they know in different ways. Before I go to appointments, I write out questions to my doctor and send them. And I say, these are the issues I'm dealing with. You figure out what's the worst and we'll talk about it when I get there.
Great.
So I think it is that communication that really matters in all of this, regardless if it's clinical trials, if it's your personal care. It is the fact that you have to communicate and that you have to be honest.
Absolutely.
I think that's a big thing is people say, well, I drink and it's only one drink a week, and they won't tell their doctors, because they think it's not a big deal. And your doctors aren't there to judge you. They're there to make the best decisions about you. So if you are going to drink or smoke or do whatever and all these things, as long as you're telling people and the risks and all of that, and you're prepared for things, you just have to be honest, because you don't know what interacts with meds. You don't know,
Right.
we're all experimenting.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. And another really great member question for you, Christine. What have you learned about yourself or your condition by partaking in these clinical trials?
So I have learned that I am important, that I have value and I have purpose. Because I think until all of this, I didn't think I had one, and I still struggle as a patient. And it's funny because people tell me I'm such an inspiration, and I'm like, just trying to survive here. And so I think the whole process and the empowerment that it's given me and the voice that it's given me has honestly changed my life. And I think that thinking that I didn't have a purpose for a long time hurt me. And now knowing that I do, and even for you, laying at home, like, you can participate in a clinical trial and have purpose, and you don't have to be a CEO of a company or anything to know that you're worth something. And I think that your voice matters. And this industry knows that your voice matters. Everything is based on patients. You wouldn't have healthcare if there weren't patients. So know that you have an important role here, and that you are a person, and don't let anyone treat you like you're not. So I think what it's taught me is that I have to be active. I have to be proactive. I have to do my research, and I have to be an educated patient in order to be taken seriously, but also to ensure that I'm going to be taking care of myself.
Christine, I feel like I couldn't have said it better. Every patient has a story behind them, and their story is real and unique to them. And, it's just so important to do what we can to help empower patients, help them feel empowered, help them ask the right questions, help them get the care that is going to be important and impactful for them. So I couldn't have said what you said better myself. That's wonderful.
I'm not more important than any other patient out there. Literally, I am trying to survive, and I am struggling just like all of you. And I think part of it that's helped is these communities I've built and these friendships. And I have friendships with industry people, and I know that there are a lot of people out there that have the right intention.
Mhm.
It's just a matter of finding those right people and connecting with the ones that are going to bring you up and that are going to value you. So my advice for everyone is find those people, find your tribe, find the people that empower you, and do this. You can do clinical trials from home. You can have healthy people participate in clinical trials to help you.
Mhm.
So communication, fight for yourself. I don't know.
Absolutely. And we want to hear from you, the community, as well. Have you had your own experiences in clinical trials? Have they helped you feel empowered? Have you felt heard when you're participating in them? If you have those stories, comment below. We want to hear all of your stories and embrace each other and support each other as we kind of navigate this new world. But feel free to have those discussions during this webinar today, and even continuing the conversation afterwards.
I actually think it's more important to continue it afterwards than just
Mhm.
today.
Yeah,
Because now you have 100 more people involved in this conversation.
absolutely. And if you think of a question, like I said, that we're not able to answer today, comment below, and we'll try our best to get to it. But if we don't, like I said, we're going to be doing 2 more live webinars with 2 of our other team of advisor members, as well as a follow-up post after the webinar today. So feel free to keep sharing your stories, and we can't wait to read them.
And I do want to say, in regards to them sharing their stories, every story makes a difference. So even if you think that nobody heard you, there is someone out there that read that and was helped by you. So even if you're struggling and you put out there any type of positive thing, you helped someone. Even if they aren't courageous enough to step up and say that you did help someone. So continue to share your story. It's the only way we're going to get results, and make your voice heard, because people need to know that you are a valued person and that you do have a purpose and you do have a mission in life. And
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
You can,
no, that you said it great, Christine. And I think that talking a little bit about how we're all virtual now, you were talking about that a little bit earlier. It goes nicely into our next topic, which is how do we continue talking and participating in clinical trials in this current climate? One of our members specifically asked, with everything going on in this pandemic, what happens to clinical trials? Are they still happening? Are we changing the way that they happen? Can you touch on this a little bit?
so clinical trials that are still happening. So if there is a clinical trial that was running, it's still going on. They're kind of more in maintenance mode at this point because COVID is a priority. So the trials are still going on, but until we solve COVID, a lot of these trials that would be started aren't going to be started. So this whole world of clinical trials has been changing for a while, and everybody's been looking into virtual clinical trials. And I think we've kind of been forced into a place where we now have to explore those. And so there are, sorry, somebody's blocked my notifications and they popped up. Um, so can you refresh me on where I left off?
Just that clinical trials are kind of pausing right now,
Oh,
and
so they're pausing, yeah. And so I think right now it's moving to the virtual world.
yep.
There are virtual trials, and there's companies popping up that are looking into this and that are trying to discover solutions. But again, that's all discussions coming up. And unless you share your stories, they're not going to find the real answers. Um, but touching on that, there are a lot of virtual trials running now. And there's a lot of trials actually running on COVID. And if I can pop in a little advertisement for my own thing, where we teamed up with the clinical or COVID-19 studies.org. And there is a list of clinical trials running from everywhere. And they're virtual trials. They need healthy people, they need non-healthy people, they need different conditions. And there's a ton of them out there. And so I think just encouraging all of you, because we cannot solve any other disease until we kind of get this under control. So in respect to the clinical trial, start now. Start on these virtual ones that are running that really don't require much. And then let's re-examine the clinical trial process once we start them. But again, until we solve COVID, kind of we're stuck in this little weird vortex. But the trials that are running now, they're continuing. And I can guarantee you'll talk to 2 executives when we talk next week that will tell you that our trials are still running and we're doing everything we can for our patient communities to make sure that they're still good.
Mhm.
So there are things in place, they're happening. New ones won't start happening until we solve some of the other issues. So get involved in them now. These are the easy virtual ones that you can do from home. And it kind of gives you this basic, like, here's a little quick run through on a clinical trial. And then once we solve that and get back into the real issues of the real diseases, then you can go into this knowing that I participated in one and it was good, you
Mhm.
know?
Absolutely. And I think you touched on, we're going into this virtual world, and now there are things like televisits. You can meet with a doctor, much like me and you are meeting today, Christine, over a phone call or a video call. So there's still ways where we can participate in these types of studies.
Nurses can
Just
come. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go
Nurses
ahead.
can come to homes. So you could have, with these studies, some have nurses that come to your homes. You know, it's not always that you have to travel to sites. It's not always, you know, it's so much technology now, and I think we're finding how to use it. So things are going to change hugely in the next couple years. And I think with your voices and with the patient stories that we have, we can only make this process better.
And Christine, I just wanted to share a really nice comment that we got from our community from member S1103. Christine, you're an inspiration. Your message that every patient adds value and has a voice is spot on. Taking charge of our own health really resonates with me. Thank you. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Let's see. But again, not an inspiration, you guys. I'm a mess. But that was sweet. And thank you. But, you know, I do think everyone matters. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Christine, we're wrapping up on time here, but I think I speak for everybody. We cannot thank you enough for sharing your time and expertise with us this morning. To everyone watching, we hope that you found this helpful and interesting. And we want to thank you all so much for joining us and submitting your questions ahead of time and being so engaged. We could have not done this event without your participation. So we just want to thank you again, all of our wonderful members that we have. Please let us know if there are any other topics you'd like to see covered in our webinars and live events. We really hope to do more of these in the future. And like I said, in fact, we'll be hosting 2 more live webinar events surrounding clinical trials with 2 of our other team of advisors members in the future. So be on the lookout for those soon. And Patients Like Me members, don't forget to like the Patients Like Me Facebook page so you can keep in touch with us. A little plug there. And if you haven't become a member of Patients Like Me, it's super easy. We'd love to have you in the community and share your story and be engaged. You can join us by visiting www.patientslikeme.com. No matter where you are in your healthcare journey, on Patients Like Me, you'll find that it's a safe and welcoming place where you can ask your questions and find other answers and talk to people who are just like you and going through some of the challenges that you're going every day dealing with your condition.
and
So
can I say really quick, I want to thank you guys for really involving your team members. I wouldn't be where I am in this stage if it wasn't for you guys and the connections I made through other opportunities that Patients Like Me gave me. So thank you for giving patients a voice and for allowing us to grow as individuals, because that's huge. And I appreciate that from the patient perspective.
Christine, thank you so much for saying that. I know you've worked with us for a number of years now, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you and getting to work with you for so many years. So I'm thrilled that we could have you on here today sharing your experiences with us. But thank you everyone again for tuning in. Be sure to hit the like button if you've appreciated this content, and leave us a comment to let us know how you think. But yeah, we will say bye to everybody to now, but I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the afternoon, a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all soon.
Stay safe.
Stay safe, everybody.